Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about permits, starts, and builder confidence. Before we dive in, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Trust and Will, for making this episode possible. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
It is wonderful to be here. It's a housing starts construction day, and my premise for always that we'll never see a construction boom in this country again still stands correct. Even though the headline data beat estimates, housing starts to look like at a 5-6 month high. But if you pull the data out a few years and even going back decades, there's something going on here that people aren't explaining correctly.
Okay, so I feel like this is one of the persistent themes that everyone in America has an opinion on, which is like we just need to build more houses. If we built more houses, then that would solve the quote unquote housing crisis. It's one of the reasons we had two home builders on at the Housing Economics Summit to talk about what home building, what that business looks like, the affordability, what they can do, what they can't do. But you've always come in and you're like, the builders are not the March of Dimes. They're not going to build just to have more inventory. That's against their business model.
In the last decade, from 2010 to 2019, I would say this is going to be the weakest housing recovery ever in the history of America. Now, back then, housing was more affordable and there was a lot of inventory, but the builders, in a sense, they were at a disadvantage because existing homes were so much cheaper and everyone had lower rates. So their sales curve, right, there were such low levels of sales. So people just thought they're just going to have a lot of leeway to grow. And because they had a very low bar, they can grow sales, but they were just constantly missing estimates left and right, 2013, 14, 15, and in 2018. So housing construction ended up being the weakest housing construction period in the history of America, working from a very low bar as well.
So from your perspective, were you surprised at this report?
No, it's a lot of people read the headlines. So what I do on X is I take the charts, shocking and love. The chart daddy takes the charts and I string it out for 10 years. And if you look at housing starts, they've literally been bouncing off the bottom around 1.3 million for many years now. And then they show a little bit of kick and then they come kind of back down. Housing permits were getting very weak toward the end of 2025. They picked up a little bit, but if you take the aggregate data and going back, nothing's been happening, right? So new home sales, on the other hand, and how I try to explain it today was that if you look at new home sales, they peaked very early in COVID. They got up to over 1 million, which I thought couldn't be possible, but they did. And then it started going lower. But it was really in 2022 when new home sales started to really get hit hard because rates were going up to 7%. But then that's when housing permits and starts really started to fade. So we've gone nowhere for years. With housing permits, housing starts. We've gone nowhere for years with new home sales, really. If you look at the last few years, they've just been kind of hovering back and forth in a little channel of sales. And then if you take it back to 2018, 19, we're just basically stuck. So all this discussion about we're going to build a lot of homes and we're going to do, you look at single family construction of housing starts, compare it now to what it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you want to take away the housing bubble years, you be my guest. It's a very valid premise. We just don't build homes like that because as a country gets older and the population growth is slowing down, the builders are competing against a mass market of housing. So they really need to have the demand curve really push them to buy land, get permits, and do homes. So I just fundamentally, and this goes all the way back to my earlier work when I first started, we're just never going to see a construction boom. And here we are in 2026. The headlines is like 5 months high, but string it out 10 years, go look at a chart, string it out 10 years, and then go look at it compared to the 60s, 70s, and you're like, what's up here, right? We're not really building like a lot of people thought we should.
I think the other thing is that you've mentioned before is like most of the building is concentrated in like Texas. Florida has 40% between those two states, 40% of the new builds, right?
I mean, so much of the building in the last, I would say, 7 to 10 years, I think like 60% of the total construction is really from uh, the Sun Belt. So it's I mean at the peak, I believe. So where's the inventory growth really at? Texas and Florida and those things. So this is why the whole March of Dimes thing was designed to, try to explain people the builders are here to make money,
Right.
and
Just
they're
like everybody else.
just like everybody else, and their total completed units of sale, like things that are ready, are kind of at 120,000. And if you go back 5 decades, right? Not a lot of people show that chart, but I like to show it to show people why on December 23rd, 2024, we said the builders have a supply and demand problem because this, not the monthly supply, but this is perking up to a level that they really pull back. So here we are. The new home sales was like a multi-year high recently, but the builders just have a lot of units that they need to work off. So because of that, you don't get really any traction. Now, if rates go lower and demand picks up and new home sales start to break out, that's a whole different equation. We haven't been able to do that. So it's not shocking to me, but it's something that, we've dealt with for a lot of years. And goes back to our article in June of 2021, where everybody was so gung-ho, here comes the construction boom in America. And I was like, you kids are so adorable. I love it. Wait till rates rise. The whole thing's going to reverse. And here we are, right? It's February 2026. And if you look at the charts and you string it out 10 years and then you string it out, to the 50s, 60s, 70s, and you're like, whoa, there's something here. And I just think mature economies that are population growth is slowing down, that's building up, this group is not going to like put their heads down and push it higher.
Well, we had in COVID, we had that sort of lapse where it was like it took so long to get things, and so you had homes that they were listed, they had been bought, but they hadn't even been construction hadn't even started yet, and or they couldn't finish because they were waiting on all that stuff. All of that's been cleared out, so now you do have this inventory that's out there that's different than it used to be in the last couple of years.
It isn't a terribly bad place for the builders as long as they keep sales elevated. It would be more of a problem if new home sales really started to break lower. Then it becomes a whole different equation. But for now, things are at bay. And I think when you look at things at a bay, and this is why, if you read the headlines today, it's like multi-month high in housing starts, everything. But you take it back and you're like, something's not looking right here. But to me, it looks perfectly normal.
So Logan, does this do the permits to the starts, is that affected seasonally like the other things that we look at as far as like the holidays, the weather? And do you look at that when you're looking at these numbers?
I mean, it's of course weather can like prevent stuff from being built. It can delay some projects, but I always thought it is when completed units of levels or sales are like under 100,000 and new home sales are growing, permits should be able to grow, right? Not a problem. So permits lead starts. Housing permits haven't gone anywhere for years. Housing starts haven't really gone for years. New home sales haven't gone anywhere for years. So I just kind of like keep it as simple as that. Don't overthink it. If new home sales started to break much aggressively lower, housing starts and permits will fall. But we've literally have gone nowhere for years here. We just kind of bounce back and forth with new home sales, housing permits, and starts. And anybody looks at those charts, like, the last few years, you're like, not much is happening. And I think that's going to be the case unless something happens to where the builders go, hey, listen, if I build this, am I going to get paid?
Right.
And that was our June 2021 article, that when rates go higher, don't be surprised if there's no construction boom. If you want the government to pay the builders or whatever, you need the government to get in. But if they're based on how they run their business for decades, this has been going on for decades, but every decade we get older as a country and we have all this inventory behind. And this is the whole premise of we're not going to see a housing construction boom because we're a mature economy and the builders are this small force against this. There's over 147 million total housing units in America. The builders are now, what, 120,000 completed units. That's it, right? It's this giant little speck of sand in this magnanimous beach, right? And the builders just don't go, okay, we'll just build. And, all of a sudden, if total units go up higher, I mean, even during the housing bubble crash period, the worst inventory period in history, the builders never even got to 200,000 completed units of sale. So the majority of all inventory in America comes from the existing home sales market. And like 2 weeks of our new listings data during the seasonal peak period amounts to more total units than the builders have ever completed in a calendar year going back decades. Right. So this is where we're at. We watch these monthly reports. They go up, they go down, but new home sales really hasn't broken out, and new home sales really hasn't broken down. It's just everything's in a channel right now with all the housing construction and new home sales data.
I think this is one of the things that I've really understood more as we've talked over the years. And then I've lived in new build communities for the last 15 years, right? Different ones. And so when you say that as soon as a home is built and sold, that home is now competing with the next thing that the builder does. And living in this community, like you see it push out block by block, and everything that's sold is now competition to the builder down the block building something. But I think the other thing is that, like, where it used to be that, new builds were more expensive, now that's not always the case. Now sometimes that's the bargain.
There's always this premium because a brand new home has all the bells and whistles. And, we have a lot of older home stock. Like we have homes from the 40s,
Right.
50s, and 60s. And it's just, unless it gets remodeled or redone, which is the case a lot of times, the builders always had this premium. That premium, in a sense, has gone down. I would still say for a lot of things on an apples to apples basis, they probably are slightly more expensive. But things have changed here, and the builders are adapting to their market environment. So always kind of remember, you look at housing permits. Permits are the thing that if that starts to break away, like we saw that in 2023 when mortgage rates got down to 6%. All of a sudden single family permits started to pick up, right? The builders were selling their homes. Well, also the builders completed units of sale wasn't over 120,000 yet. So they're like, okay, all right, let's go, right? We got more profit margins. We could cut down rates. It's different now. Like the builders' confidence, I encourage everyone, go look at the builders' confidence. It isn't at the lowest levels of the post-COVID higher rates, but it's not screaming, hey guys, we're ready to go. I mean, the headline number was down this week. The future sales were down a smidge, everything. So again, think of them as businessmen and women, and they're here to make money. So it's a tricky industry, but it'll be interesting to see what the government does and tries to, get construction going. But again, I encourage everyone, be a nerd like the chart daddy. Take a 10-year chart of housing permits, housing starts, and new home sales, and then look at it. We've really got nowhere. And then go back to the 60s and 70s era. We used to build a lot of homes. Like, well, we're a younger country, growing population, and there was less competition out here, but now more competition out there. So the builders are, again, not the March of Dimes.
Not the March of Dimes. Logan, thank you so much for being on again, and we will talk again soon.
Pleasure.